Yes? Yeah. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Adriek van Nieuwhuizen. I'm head of industry at IDFA. And I all welcome you here at this, I think, very important session, because we are going to talk, or you are going to speak and listen about the way you can sustain as a filmmaker. How do you earn your money, or maybe not? I'm very pleased that we are collaborating for several years now already with LaScam, the French authors organization, and I'm very pleased to have worked again with you on this important topic and to have this session here. The session will be led by Martijn Winkler, who has been moderating many times before us, but he's also not only a good moderator, but also a specialist specific in this topic. So please give a warm hand to Martijn, who will introduce the panel.
Thank you, Adriek. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Oh, that makes me very nervous when I'm being called a specialist in this area. I'm a filmmaker, director. I have also been president of the Dutch Directors Guild for 7 years, and I'm on the board of FERA, the European Association of Directors. So I have been involved in this topic, but I certainly would not call myself expert. Somehow, every time I talk about it, I get confused, like a lot of us do. So I think it's important that we do talk about it to keep it clear what we're talking about. So what are we talking about? I like this leaflet which is lying around here, how to get filmmakers the money they deserve, which is a great title, basically what we're talking about. We're about creating, which is a word I don't really like, but let's use it. We're creating content which is used to reach audiences and used to make a lot of money from. And somehow it feels that as authors, as documentary filmmakers, directors, writers, we're not always sharing in the profits that are being made as much as we could. And next to that financial aspect, there's also the idea of control of our work. How do we know how it's distributed? Who's seeing it? Where is it being shown? Is it shown in a way that is part of the reason we're making these films? So these are important topics to talk about. Also topics that we tend to run away from a bit as directors. As soon as it starts talking about rights and money, we start looking a bit, bit out of place and think, well, let me make the films and we'll talk about the money later. But it's so important that we do get around it and stand up for our rights, which is the title for this morning. Before I dive into that, I'd like to get a bit of a grasp who are in the audience this morning, just so we can see how complicated we can get into the subject matter, or if we have to stay very simple, or who you are. So in the audience, are there directors in the audience? Look, there's quite a few of you directors. Thank you. Are there producers in the audience? Also. Are there directors who are also producers? Yeah. That happens a lot in documentary. Thank you. Yes. Are there people from, let's say, broadcasters, maybe? No. The ones with the money are drinking champagne in the Intercontinental right now, right? Are there people from funds, film funds, that kind of organization? It's a bit, half a finger or so, some people, okay. Are there people from collective management organizations here, CMOs? Yes. Of course, SCAM is in the house, I assume. And some others as well, I know. Journalists, maybe, so we know that we have to really take care of what we say? No. Okay, so no, it's okay. So we can talk freely, because it's, I'm going to invite my guests later on, but this is, this stuff, to talk about money is always difficult, not talk about how you make money or how you don't make money. It's quite an intimate subject, so I think it's really terrific that we have 3 speakers who are here to talk about their ideas and experiences on that end. So it's, it would be nice to keep it as an intimate session, to talk freely and discuss and really see where we can go from here. So to stay with you as an audience, I was wondering, one of our starting points will be the copyright directive. Who knows what that is? Okay, one hand in the back, and you should know what that is, the copyright. Okay. Well, that's great, because we're going to talk about what it is. So it's really good that you don't know it yet. And not only are we going to talk about what it is, we're also going to talk about how it might benefit you in the future. Who knows about primary and secondary payments, remunerations, that kind of thing? Oh, very few people. Has anybody ever received money from their rights, from the directors who are here? There are a lot less people, see that, than who are directors here. Okay, so this is it's good. It's good that we have you here to talk about what's possible or not. And we'll discuss also that it's quite different in every country that we're from. Some countries are further ahead in terms of how your rights are managed and how much remuneration payments you get from that than other countries. And that's one of the reasons the copyright directive is interesting. For me, as a director, just last week, I went onto the website of our collective management rights organization, VEVAM, to click on the works that I made. And it's really interesting. We log in to a system, and then I see all the stuff that I directed in 2018. And I can say, click, yes, this is what I made. I was also surprised that the system knows what I made and how much, when it was broadcast and how many times. It was quite an interesting thing to see that it was already being tracked. And if it was not there, I had an option to add it in the system, and then they would, I don't know, somebody behind the scenes would probably have to start looking for it. Why did we miss it? But for me, everything was there. And then I get a certain amount of money, immediately visual, okay, this is the amount of money I get from my, basically the copyright on my work and the fact that it's broadcasted on TV, which was a very pleasant surprise coming Christmas months, which are expensive. So for me, that's a very practical way that I look at my author's rights, is that it's a way, an additional means of income. And I'm really happy that we in the Netherlands at least have a very strong organization who's on top of that. This is only for television though, and catch-up television as we call it. I don't know if every country has that, but now after you have a broadcast for a few weeks, it's visual, it's online through the broadcaster, and you get some secondary payment for that as well. There's no deals in that sense with these big streaming giants which are out there, from YouTube to Netflix to all these online on-demand platforms, at least not as well organized yet as the television. And this is also one of the reasons we're here. It's just this weekend I was reading the New York Times, and there's an article there, if I can find it, which reads, let's see if I can, "The streaming era is changing everything," which is a pretty strong title. But it's interesting. When it introduces, it starts to talk about how our film industry always experiences a seismic shift every 3 decades, or roughly once in a generation, right? From the transition from silent films to talkies in the 20s, the rise of broadcast television in the 1950s, the raucous "I want my MTV" cable boom of the 1980s, and now we are in the streaming revolution, this huge leap. So we're really at a momentous place now when things are really changing rapidly and revolutionary ways. And that also means the way that we as authors have a means to reach our audience, but also a way, how are we going to make money from that? And so this momentum right now, it's very important. What we do now and solidify now will be important at least for the next 3 decades when the new revolution comes along, whatever that will be. And there's a quote from an American author here which I wanted to read as the last part of my introduction. Not a documentary maker, but a filmmaker, Courtney Kemp, who amongst them created a series called Power. She campaigned, and what she says is this: the companies, and what she says companies, she means the streaming giants, so the Netflixes, the YouTubes, the HBOs. The companies are looking actively to buy us out up front, so they don't have to share profits with us, and they don't have to pay us for reuse, and they will never have to tell us the truth about the value of our content. They will own your intellectual property outright and forever, Ms. Kemp continued. as my 8-year-old daughter would say, no backsies. And that's an issue worth striking over. Just to let you know how strong our position is felt by some makers out there. So, the copyright directive then. Before I go into exactly what it is, I was a bit involved in the whole campaign of getting it across. It was a big, you could say it was a battle from authors on the other side and the streaming giants in alliance with producers and broadcasters on the other side. And just to show you what kind of battle it was, they actually flew in rappers to Brussels to make their point solid and to try to win the argument. So there was a lot at stake. And it was, in the discussion, a lot of it was framed as being an issue about the free internet, right? It was framed as being, if the copyright directive goes through, that means our internet will just die because there's no free use anymore, and the internet is about creative freedom and creative, about freedom of expression, and that will get lost when the copyright directives goes through, which was a very strong framing, which was adopted by a lot of media, which is actually not the case, and we'll get into that a bit as well. What was the case? That basically, for us authors, the copyright directive is about protecting our work, being able to see what is out there, knowing how much money is made from it, and being able to get a share of that, which is our hard-earned work, back. So, to explain a bit more about that, I want to go into a bit of a discussion with Vianney. No, your last name is French, which is I'm really bad at it. Baudeux, yeah, got it right. From LaScam, thank you. Come on in. Please welcome in. And so we have. Oh, I did skip. Let's go to the first slide.
Okay.
So I skipped that just as an extra introduction. I always like this slide.
That's the last one, actually.
Yeah.
That's the last one.
I put it in front. I put it in front just to give you a context, because this is you basically talking to you directors in there. This is a study that was done about the income of European authors. So who's the median European audiovisual author, which is interesting, which is basically me. So I'm a man, 40-ish. Now you know my income, which is pretty... okay. I work a lot. But you see that audiovisual authors are not rich people. They are struggling. They are really, really struggling. A lot, and that's not on this slide. A lot of audiovisual authors are dependent on, for instance, a spouse who does have a steady job. So it's, if you think about, is it possible to survive as an author, as a director, just by yourself? You could, well, it's barely. And it's interesting also that they work a lot. They have usually have a master's degree, so they're very, these are smart people. You're smart people, and yet we are struggling and not making money. At the same time, if you look at how much money is being made with content and the content boom, you think, well, something's not wrong there. There's also interesting things to be said about the male-female difference here. I'm not going to specifically go into that, but that's something we're looking into as well, because there's differences there which should not be there in my mind. So just as a starting point, this is not just about we want more money. This is about money that we deserve because it's part of our livelihood, and as authors we're barely making ends meet, and that's just not right. So that is an introduction. We have we're going to talk a bit about, you want to click through? That's maybe easier.
Thank you. Hello. So I'm Vianney Baudeux. I work in LaScam, and I was part, actually, next to Martin, of the battle for the copyright directive that, as you said, opposed the authors and the CMOs, of course, against the GAFAs. So that was kind of a David against Goliath battle, yeah. Which actually started a few years ago in September 2016. The European Commission, issued its first text proposal for the copyright directive. you know, on the European level, it's always the Commission proposing, and then there is a Parliament and the Council voting the text. So first, the thing to understand is that Europe, the mindset at the European level on copyright has evolved a lot, because the Commission, the Juncker's Commission, used to see it as used to see copyright as an enemy of free market and free movement of goods, services, and blah blah blah. And now we have reached a point where they now see it as a friend for cultural diversity and for also a thriving economy, because cultural and creative industries are actually the third sector in Europe in terms of economic revenues.
Is it right to say that they also see it as a way to protect Europe from the outside forces coming in, if you look at the YouTubes and...
Exactly, yes, that's also a sovereignty weapon, I guess, because culture is always a soft power, obviously. Yeah, we would like to make a presentation on how copyright directive made the EU became your friend. Actually, the directive, I don't know if you've heard about that. There is only one girl, I think, in the back who raised her hands just before. But the main point of the directive is that YouTube, Dailymotion, these video sharing platforms, namely in the directive the OCSSP, I'm sorry for that, but it's online content sharing service providers, the directive enshrined that they were actually making and performing an act of communication to the public, which is actually the legal tool to require an authorization from the right holder. So it's like a major tipping point in the EU copyright law, let's say. And as it is an act of communication, it requires the platforms to seek authorization from the relevant right holders. By what? By actually signing agreements with their representatives, which are like CMO on the front, but also unions or the guilds or whatever. So these GAFAs will now have to sign agreements with the right holders, and it means that they will have to remunerate them.
So that means they can't put our films online without reaching out to the right organizations and making financial...
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I will deal with the author's remuneration, but it doesn't mean that they are themselves authorized to give a license for their content. Actually, it's the producer, of course, the owner of the right. Yeah. But there is also the authorization of the creators that matters, and that's the directive, what the directive is about. The copyright directive has 3 major articles. The 2 most relevant ones for you are Articles 17 and 18 and followings. So Article 17 contains the principle that I just mentioned about seeking authorization for the right holders from the platform. I think I won't go into details, but let's say that freedom of expression in these platforms is actually preserved, as caricature, parody, blah 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 are copyright exceptions, and they are there is actually like a carve out in the directive to preserve them. And there is also more rights for users. I don't know if you are yourself, users, and if you generate contents on YouTube directly, like the YouTubers actually, but these people will actually be protected. Why? With 2 tools mostly. First, because the abusive removals for copyright issues, I think you know that on YouTube you can, if your content is actually pirated and put online, you can claim for the rights. But sometimes there is abusive removals coming from not the real right holders. So the YouTubers will have a way to ask for the platform to investigate on whether it's an abusive removal or not, and they will have to give them a proper answer. And the second opportunity for them is that the directive says that the license that will be signed between right holders and the platform will at least cover the usages of these YouTubers or users actually of the platform. So Article 17 is actually key. The other articles that are key for you is Article 18 and the following ones, also known as Chapter 3 in the directive. And the main of these articles is Article 18 that enshrines the principle of appropriate and proportionate remuneration. It is actually key because the principle was existing in actually quite a substantial number of EU countries, like in France, like in Poland, in Spain, in Belgium, in other countries. But I don't know in the Netherlands actually if there's a legal principle of proportionate remuneration for authors.
Yes, for television broadcast there is definitely.
Okay. Television. Okay, so
for the video on demand, let's say that's. But I can ask a little bit later what the status is now exactly. Okay. That's still in negotiation.
Sure, and there is also a gap between theory and practice. Most of the time.
Oh, sure.
So what provides the Article 18 is a promise of being fairly remunerated. But still, it has to be implemented.
Just to because when I talked about who receives remuneration, we didn't have a lot of hands. Just to be very basic, what does appropriate and proportionate remuneration mean?
Appropriate and proportionate remuneration means that you don't only have upfront payments or primary payments, as you said.
So that's like the fee you get from your producer?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's an amount of money that you get from the producer in the beginning of the process. And the proportionate remuneration is the one that you are entitled to claim to the producer to get a share of the revenues of the success of the work. So this is now a legal requirement made by the European Union, and once again, it's a huge step.
Yeah, so that's not part of your fee that you get upfront. That's something you get after it's being broadcast or sold or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So we call this secondary payments.
Yeah.
So it grants you the right to secondary payments, actually. Yeah. Then there are these articles helping you to consolidate your situation with the producer. Article 19 is sets a transparency requirement for the right holder. What does that mean? It means that you have an access to the producer accountability in order to know whether he's duly applying Article 18, actually. So this helps Article 18 to be really put into practice.
So that gives you an opportunity to check, basically.
Exactly. Once a year, the producer must give you the accounts, basically, of the success of the work in itself. Yeah. Yes, and now let's move on. Article 20. It's called the bestseller clause. It means that it's a new right for you to claim for additional remuneration on top of Article 18 when the success of your work is such a big hit that the initial payment that you get in the beginning seems not proportional anymore. So it's a clause that makes you be able to review and to claim for a review even of the initial payment, actually.
Of the fee up front.
Yeah, and the fee up front and the fee post front. So it's also very meaningful for authors, actually. Then Article 22 is the right of revocation. This one, for me, is a bit more, I don't know, curious, or I don't know how it will be applied, actually. But it's a right for you to retrieve the rights when there is a lack in the exploitation of the work by the producer. So yeah, there is a right of revocation now entering for the authors, but the idea is, what are they going to do with these rights retrieved? Maybe you have an idea or situation that could illustrate the.
Yeah, that's when it's not exploited enough. You have a right to take it back? Is that
yeah,
basically
exactly.
what it means?
But
yeah.
what could an author do with having his rights?
Yeah.
Selling it again? I don't know. Okay, so what's next actually? There is also a neighboring rank for press publishers, but as Martin said, that there is no journalist. I think we can in the room. I mean, we can maybe skip this slide. Yeah. So what the copyright directive is about now, and what does that mean for the authors? It means clearly and very simply more royalties from YouTube, from Google, from Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Which is actually...
And anything else that comes, right? I will always focus with these things on what we see now on social media. You might think, I don't do anything for social media, I do stuff for other stuff. But this is basically a principle of the new future. And who knows, if television might completely disappear and this comes into place. So this is something which enables us as authors, whatever new platforms arise in which people watch documentaries or films or anything, we have a possibility to get a share of the revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. For these, let's say, new platforms, even though they are not so new anymore. And it also means, that's what I showed you with Article 18 and the following ones, more harmonized rights throughout the EU. And for instance, in the case of a co-production, when there is a rights, like national rights conflicting, you have now harmonized rights and European rights for proportionate remuneration, for instance. So that is key. What does it not mean? So as I said, I've seen quite there is quite a numerous number of producers in the room, so don't be afraid. You're still the owner of the rights, and there is no. Well, the author doesn't own the right to exploit and to make the content available on YouTube and Facebook and blah blah blah. You are still the one holding the rights. So yeah, that's the main point, I think, and yeah, I think I mostly quite wrote twice the same thing actually. Yeah. Another point that is important is that the directive is not saying about anything about monetization. I don't know if you do have content broadcast on YouTube, or you, okay, and you know then that you sign kind of a partnership or a contract with YouTube to share the monetization, to share the advertisement revenues. So the directive does not do anything about that, actually. It's not ruling that. Yeah. So what's next, actually? The next steps are, and why is the session calling Stand Up for Your Rights, and what can you do to stand up for your rights, actually? I would say you can now advocate for a fair transposition law in the national law, because actually when a EU regulation or directive is adopted, then it requires the national law to make the principles and the articles penetrate within the national law, and you can provide your help for lobbying for a good transposition. You can also
just to make it even clearer. This is European law, right? So what has to happen now? That this European law has to be taken over and implemented in each European country. Exactly. And is it as simple as, okay, just as copy and paste if we stick to the online world, or is that a whole new negotiation within each country? What I'm saying is could it be different per country how much is taken from this European directive?
In general, that's a very good question actually. In general, the states are actually able to reinforce the principles adopted by the EU. In the case of the copyright directive, to my opinion, it's actually precise enough to be more or less copy and pasted actually within the national law. And this is more or less what's happening in France. Actually, France and the Netherlands are leaders so far to transpose the directive. And in France, there is this big draft bill on audiovisual law regulation, and the articles concerning the directive are more or less copy-pasted. Actually, yes, it's true. And I don't know how it is in the Netherlands. Maybe you can say a few words.
Yeah, well, we'll go into that a bit later. That's a good question. But what I also know that there is there are concerns that not every country will be as easy to adopt these principles. So that it does require lobby work from your own directors' organizations and directors among themselves to make sure that the lawmakers in your country understand what's at stake and why it is important for authors to have this directive in place.
Yeah, exactly, and it's interesting that you're saying that, because there were like, I think, 6 countries voting against the directive in the end of the process, including the Netherlands, actually.
Netherlands voted against, yes.
Yes, they were actually the first who said that they will transpose it. So thank you for your discipline. Yeah. And the thing is, there are quite a lot of numbers of countries where the process is just stopped for political issues, like due to the political turmoil, for instance, in Poland, recently in Spain, or in other countries like in Slovenia, the process is completely stopped. And Poland even is even like more or less prosecuting, let's say, the EU because they consider it's an infringement to free market or free something, freeness. I don't know. Yeah.
So I mean, the battle is not over. That's the main message. If you have, it's important that you reach out in your own country and ask your own organizations, what can I do? What are we doing to make sure that this is implemented in our law? Because if not, then the nice word you had, the union harmonize the rights throughout Europe. That's something which is still at stake.
Yeah. The battle is definitely not over. That's true. Yeah.
All right, thank you for your explanation. And we might pull you back when we need you. I'd like to invite our 3 guests on stage, terrific directors who are all here with films at IDFA, some premiering tonight. All of them are showing film tonight even. And so really happy they made some time to be here to talk about this. To talk a bit about reaction to this copyright directive and a bit broader about what it means to make a livelihood as a director, how they make that possible, and maybe how they look at the rights situation in their work. We have here Alexander Nanau. Let's see where you are. Please give him a warm welcome. His film, take a seat where you want. There you go. It's film Collective is playing tonight even, right?
Yes, it's
premiering?
called 9:30 Tuschinski 1.
There we go.
Tickets are still available.
It's very received very well in the press I've read. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm going to invite everybody at the same time so we can have a discussion. Susanne Raas is here, director from the Netherlands. Alexander, you're from Romania. I failed to say that originally. Yeah. And Susanne has a film called MS, also screening tonight.
Yes.
Yes. And we are very honored as well to have Patricio Guzman and Renate Sachs here. And Patricio, maybe if you sit on the corner.
Next to each other.
No, they sit at the corner, and then we have a translator available as well, who will sit there. So if you move over, that's the best. So it's a bit of a group. And Patricio is IDFA guest of honor, so he has a lot of his work showing here, as well as a selection of his favorite films. So we're really honored to have him with us. Very experienced director, a long time. So we'll have a very different views and backgrounds sitting with us. And what I'd like to start off with, if you hear, Alexander, if I start with you, if you hear about this rights discussion, is this something which you're involved in as an author yourself? Is this something you recognize, authors' rights, or is this something which you don't focus on at all?
No, I do focus on it. The thing is, I really, from the beginning of my career, I really, took care of it in my contracts with the producers, to really have access to, to data, where my work is showing, and what the remunerations will be. But I was also in the privileged position to have been always, whether I was the main producer or a co-producer that participated consistently to the budget. So I had all these rights also as a co-producer to have insight into everything. And I must say that, I mean, thinking about it, I don't know if I would have been able to sustain to work as a director if I would only rely on an income as a director. Mm-hmm. It would have been impossible. I don't think that I would, you know, still after 10 or more years be doing films. I don't know. It's in the documentary field. It's almost impossible to survive only, you know, working only as a director. And so I really rely on other income, like my producer's share, or I also, you know, my writer's share, or I also film my films. So I collect from my different positions in a production. But just as a director, I think it's impossible.
Does that influence your work as a director? Is it hard to focus as a director if you have to diversify your means of income?
What do you mean?
Well, if you can't survive only as a director, you have to do other things as well. Do you struggle to focus on your work as a director?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't in that position because I managed to earn enough money so that I go on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if I would have been forced to, you know, to live out of what I earn only as a director, yeah, sure, I would need to do other things. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you recognize that, Susanne?
Well, I think I do recognize it in periods of my life that I was not able to survive as a director, but the last 10 years, mainly also because of the royalties, but also because we've been starting producing our own films. It was easier to invest also in new programs, in new films, and to work on several films at the same time, which is necessary if you want. If you do films where you follow someone from many years, you need to start new projects to be able to continue working. And that was easier since I produced with a group of directors together. Yeah.
So both of you are also producing. We had a lot of people in the audience who were doing the same, right? Yeah. It's very common, you could almost say, if this was a scientific study. Common and necessary, maybe?
It's not so common in Holland.
No.
There are, I think, a lot of older directors who are starting to produce their own films, and there are also very young directors who do it. But a lot of the funds do not accept directors being part of the production company. You really need a separate, which I understand, you need a separate producer. You cannot produce your own films, so you need to find solutions to have like a checks and balances thing within your production company.
But then you're basically, as a director, forced in a situation where you can't rely on the income to sustain yourself.
Yeah, that's hard. I think it's hard for a lot of directors. A lot of people want to produce or be able to have a more transparent production process to see where the budget, how it is, and that's a lot of conflicts between producers and directors. Or that's I think main reason that a lot of directors in Holland are going from one production company to the other and to the other. You do not see very many long-term relationships, and of course that is very important, that you have a long-term relationship with your producer to really build up something and to work on several projects at the same time. It's the best thing if you can really invest in long-term relationship.
Yeah. Well, we have a long-term relationship sitting at the end here. You have been working together for how many years?
27.
27 years, and you produce all of Patricia's films, or how does this work?
No, only les three. Actually, the last 3 films.
Last 3, okay.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
And when we talk about this issue of sustaining a livelihood as a director, you've had a long career, Patricio. Do you recognize the struggle to survive as a director financially?
Mi carrera se compone de 3 partes.
My career has 3 parts.
The Battle of Chile, la primera parte.
Please go. So the Battle of Chile, which is the first part,
que es una producción cubana
a Cuban production,
y que yo tuve libertad para moverla en el mundo.
and I was really free to move the film around the world.
La segunda parte son como 8 películas documentales que nunca tuve ningún control.
Then I did 8 documentary films, and I had no control over them.
El caos total.
Total chaos on
El
those films.
robo total.
It was a theft, totally a theft.
Y finalmente 3 películas que ha producido Renate, donde las cosas van bien.
And finally, I have 3 films that have been produced by Renate, and now things are going well.
En definitiva, hacer documentales es desastroso.
I don't need to translate that, but indefinite, doing documentaries is a disaster.
Que nos gusta mucho, a mí me encanta hacer documentales, pero la industria en general nos estafa.
We love to do it. I love to do documentary films, but the industry is a total scam. It's
And it's interesting you say it's no control, right? We're talking about we're focused on a lot of financial remuneration, but it's also about controlling your work, knowing where it is, who's it shown to. Is that what you refer to as well?
Es verdad, digamos que no sabemos dónde se distribuyen nuestras obras.
It's true. We really don't know where our work goes.
Hay un momento en que se pierde el control.
There's a time when you lose control.
That is, we talked a bit earlier, I was talking to Suzanne about that issue of control. Could you maybe explain what you said to me?
I think we all have had situations that you're, maybe not all, but that you're just zapping, or that you're in an aeroplane and then suddenly you see your own film in KLM, and you said, how is this film getting here, and why didn't anyone tell me? Of course, I always feel very honored, and I really want my film to be everywhere and to be seen by everyone. That's one thing. I think in Holland, directors, mainly, we have good funding. We have good public television. I think, and compared to other countries, it's not so bad. But what for us is now really a present danger is that in the new contracts between production companies and the public broadcasters, is that, okay, you get economically royalties for your broadcast, but still the broadcasting company who is co-producing your film often is allowed to use clips of your films endlessly. And basically, when you co-produce a film, if you don't arrange it really well in your contract, then another television show can just grab out of your films like 50 minutes. There's no limit to what, and that's something that is not only economically painful, but also as an artistic author, you don't want your work cut into pieces. And the third thing, which is for me very important, when you ask vulnerable people or famous people, in my case, to be filmed in delicate situations, you always use trust as your main power. You say, I make the film about you, I choose what I take from this scene, and please trust me. But if you're in your contract are given away the right and pieces of your film, and even your rough material in the contracts you have to sign now, the rough material of the film is, the broadcasting company is owner as well of the rough material. And of course, I never give it to them. I say, again, I had a crash in my hard disk, but that really feels me really. That's my biggest problem at this moment. But I understand. First, das Fressen und dann die Morale. First, you have to eat, and then this moral issue comes. But for me, as a documentary maker, this is, for me, the most important right issue we have to deal with.
Especially as documentary makers,
Especially,
this is where you
and
say
that's
trust
different.
is your main commodity, right?
Exactly, that's for fiction filmers, I think, different. But we really rely on trust and to being trustworthy.
Yeah. And in that sense, if we looked at the directive, the words like there's transparency obligation, right? That we have all these platforms which we now have tools that they have to show where it's shown, how many times it's shown, that we're able to get that information and act on it, I think that's an important step.
Yeah, but that is still complicated. I mean, how would you, I mean, even the producer doesn't really know where, you know, you have the information from a sales agent, but you don't really have the information when it is aired. So, okay, you can impose in your, even in your contract with the producer that you get the same report from the sales agent as the producer does, so that you know where it was sold to. But it's really hard to track when it is screened. Mm-hmm. So when it is broadcasted. Because then you have to go back, I mean, as an author, you go to your collecting agent for the author rights. And that's the problem I have, for example, in Romania, is they're really, it's not like here, where you just access the website and see it. I go there, and they have like handwritten lists, you know, and I really rely on the employee of the agency, yeah. Which is mind-blowing. So you really don't have control.
So you're afraid maybe that it sounds good, transparency obligation, but in practice it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean the stage that we're seeing now, I think it's still baby steps, let's say, because all that is in it now, for example, is in the Romanian authors law, is already part of it. But how do you control it? You know, and what does it mean that you earn? That the remuneration should be, how is it called? It should be in proportion to the success. Yeah. So who is deciding the proportion? Because the producer might say, you know, I had more expenses, whatever, you know, I didn't make my money back. So what's a good proportion? How do you measure it? Do you take, I don't know, your primary income and you know, compare it with the total budget, or nobody is talking about what's the algorithm of participating in proportion to the success of the film, to the financial success. Yeah.
Maybe it's good to throw that question in somebody in the audience who knows. Can I ask you, Sylvia? Oh, yeah, there's a microphone there. Wow, that's great. Sylvia is director of VEVAM. If you hear this question about what's proportionate?
Yes, it's of course that's a difficult question, but we are trying to arrange for contracts with the on-demand services, for instance, on a voluntary basis at this moment in time. Unfortunately, I think it would be better when it is included in the law, like a linear broadcast remuneration right for the authors. We are fighting for that, but we have succeeded to arrange for that for linear broadcasting, to have an amount of money per subscriber of a cable thing. So that is working, and we are working on a collective arrangement for on-demand services to pay to the CMOs of filmmakers a percentual part of their income. And so, but this at this moment in time, it's very difficult to include all the on-demand services in the Netherlands, and so we will struggle on. But at the same time, we will try to get it into the Dutch copyright law, that there is a legal right to remuneration for filmmakers. That is what we are working on at this moment, and the directive is hopefully of help to us, because the principle is set within the directive, but then again we will have to wait how this will be included in the Dutch copyright law.
And Vianney, in France, this is already in place, right, with on-demand platforms. So I was wondering if we talk, it's a question about what is proportionate, how does that work?
For on-demand platforms?
In France, yeah.
For documentary filmmakers, there is no need to ask for proportionality, because it's the CMO giving out and distributing the rights for some on-demand platforms, actually, namely Netflix, other platforms. And when it's not the case, we recommend our authors to ask for 10% of the revenues of the producer. Generally, they don't get it. Sometimes they get 5% or something like this. But to our opinion, what we are advocating for is 10%.
It's a negotiation every time, then.
It is actually negotiating.
So it's not like an automatic...
No, it's not. We do have, in the law, in the French law, we do have, as I said, a principle of proportionality that is already enshrined. But, however, there is no definition on what should proportionality means, actually.
No. I had a discussion on this topic with the Netflix delegation in Brussels, and they were talking about difference. If you look at television, you could say the amount of people who viewed it. You could say that's the success, right? The amount of views. But for a streaming platform which has which works on subscription, like Netflix, some titles, it's not as important for them that a lot of people see it. It also has like a prestige that we have this film, and that's a reason why people subscribe. So the value of a title is not necessarily the amount of people who have seen it, it's just that it's part of their portfolio, right? The reason why I say I want to pay 10 euros a month, a lot of people do that, right? They say they're going to watch things, but when they're on Netflix, they only watch Marvel things. But the reason they say they join it because it has Roma on there. But that is a value, of course. So how do you know what monetize that? That's difficult, I guess. Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
I would like to say something. I try to say it in Spanish. It's much easier for me. A mí me parece bastante irreal todas esas buenas condiciones que pueden existir.
I think that those are good conditions that you're talking about, but for me they sound unreal.
Las películas de Patricio, La Batalla de Chile, La Cruz del Sur, El Nombre de Dios, La Memoria Obstinada, El Caso Pinochet, Salvador Allende, lo bajamos todos los 6 meses de YouTube.
All of Patricia's films, The Battle of Chile, The Case of Pinochet, Salvador Allende, The Cross of the South, and I'm missing one, In the Name of God, we are taking them down of YouTube every 6 months, and I'm trying really hard to do it.
Yeah, no sirve para nada.
But it's not working.
Y además, La Batalla de Chile la más pirateada, no solamente por YouTube, yo ya ni lo sé, yo ni conozco todas esas plataformas, no tengo tiempo de ir a ver si acaso roban alguna de las películas, no tengo tiempo.
The worst case is The Battle of Chile. It has so much piracy around the film. It's not just YouTube, it's so many platforms. And me as a producer, I don't have the time or the knowledge of any other platforms to go and look for them, which are they and which are like having my film illegally.
Y cuando nosotros llegamos a París hace unos 20 años, los contratos para Patricio, la participación en las recettes eran 0,4%.
And 20 years ago, when we got to Paris, the contract said that the royalty that Patricio would get out of the film was 0.4%.
Y eso hasta 2004 en el caso de Salvador Allende.
And that remained like that until 2004 with Salvador Allende.
No, eso significa en realidad que nunca recibe ningún centavo el realizador, porque tiene que hacer 1 millón de entradas para llegar a 0,4%.
So it means the filmmaker will never get a dime out of it because he will need to reach 1 million viewers to get something out of that.
Yeah. Desde que nosotros nos autoproducimos y yo soy la productora, tiene sobre cada contrato 10% porque LaScam lo recomienda. Pero no sé cuántos otros productoras lo hacen.
And since I am producing the film, he's got a royalty of 10%, but because I am producing and this is what LaScam is recommending, but I don't know how many producers are actually doing that.
10% sobre las entradas en sala.
10% only from theatrical income.
Que no tiene nada que ver con sus derechos de autor, su salario y los otros.
Has nothing to do with his salary or copyrights.
Maybe to expand a bit on that, if we are a bit in a unique position here that we're producers and directors either in the same person or are very closely tied. How strong do you think, as directors, as documentary directors, we are when we negotiating about our rights with producers, for instance, or networks? You're laughing?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I was just thinking about with my last film, Toto and His Sisters, when it started off, you know, as an initiative by another producer to make a smaller thing, and then I came in as a co-producer and brought actually most of the financing. But when it started with a meeting when I said I need to see a budget. In order to be able to work the way I work, I need to know, you know, how creative I can be in time, and they gave me a budget with the last line was the total amount of money they had until then, and all the positions were 0, 0, 0. I said, like, that's not I can't work with that. I have to know what. And they go like, don't worry about that. When you need something, just tell us. You know, I said, no, I mean, it's not going to work that way. Either you make a proper budget or you can find another director. And it was really, the whole production was just an exhausting fight with a producer that had no respect for the work, that had no respect for a budget, which as a documentary filmmaker, you know, the budget is the, because it's so extended in time and you never know, you know, where you end up, how much effort you have to put into obtaining the story. And if you have a producer that has no respect for that, it's just, as a filmmaker, it can kill you.
But you went ahead with it.
I went ahead with it because I made, you know, little steps and had the support of Bianca also, that was also in that production, and we fought together for that. And then I brought, you know, I brought more financing into it. And the lawyer, so you know, I said, like, I'm not sitting with you at the same table anymore, so it will be my lawyer from now on. Yeah, it ended up that even I brought more financing. He said, you know, I will only accept the financing in this production if you recognize that 30% of it, we have to say that I brought it in, so that he doesn't lose the majority. So it's a tough game as a documentary filmmaker. So you have, you know, I think it changes a lot now because more and more producers, you know, are really good into producing documentaries and they know what a long run it is. Yeah, it's a tough game between directors and producers.
Yeah. So I mean, stand up for your rights sounds easy, but it's difficult.
It's difficult, and you really have to. I think it's not enough to be, let's say, sensitive filmmaker. You really have to know how to fight that game too. Yeah.
I think in Holland, the Dutch Directors Guild and also the Film Fund and the Media Fund worked together with directors, also to forcing means not so kind, but really when you get funding for a film, then your producer should give over the contract with the director, and then can get the funding. So that is like protecting the director to get a view into the budget. And but then still, I had situations with the production company that I was allowed to see the budget, but I had to see it in the office, not making photographs. I had to just, in a leaflet, just go through it, and I tried to have a good memory, memorize everything and write it down, and it was really like this stupid. And I think just be open with it. Just, since I've been producing films, or producing together with my producer, I understand how hard the work for a producer is, and I think it's much better to make your director also give this transparency, explain why you have to keep money aside for the worst things to come after post-production, but just be open with it. Yeah. And since we've been producing ourselves, we could say at the end of the line, okay, we did well. If you do well as a producer, as a production company, you always have money left. And then say, okay, we have money left, let's share this as well. So I think you have a great, how do you say it? Invest in the relationship with your director if you're, as a production company, be open about the budget. And then I think directors will stay with you and make great things together. That's the main thing. It's very bad if it's only a fight. And I think if the film fund, as in Holland, say to the production company, give us a signed contract with your, then we know that
Yeah.
you've been together working on this.
Yeah.
Sorry, my English is not so.
No, it's good. Stand up for your rights sounds like a call to arms, but it's about collaborating, right? And it's who are we calling toward? We should be focused on the platforms or the broadcasters who are making money and making sure that as a team of producer director, we're sure that we're in control of what happens there.
And still a lot of directors in Holland I meet, they don't know about VEVAM. They don't know that there's money for them waiting. I cannot explain it. Tell every young director you know that it's there for them. Tell them to join the Directors Guilds. It's so important to not have this fight alone.
Yeah, but I have a question. Is there a limit in years to go back? Because, for example, in Romania, when I went to the collecting agency, they have a limit of 3 years they can collect in the past. So I don't know if there's a limit here.
I don't know. I'm gonna look at you, Vianney. There is a limit. 5 years we have, and you had 3 years. So that's not even harmonized as well across European countries.
No, I think that even the broadcasters are not really. They try not to. If you pass the deadline, it's like okay. It's hard now to
purposely.
We because the money was distributed. That's the problem of the broadcasters and also of the collecting agencies. Because in the end they distribute what is over. They distribute in proportion to what was already distributed. So if you come 3 years too late, then they say, yeah, but the money for 2016 was distributed.
Yeah. Patricio, I would ask you, we talked about the position as a director and to get up for your rights. Have you noticed maybe in your career that your position has changed? Have you had more negotiating power, as it were, as a director?
Si Renate lleva mis obras, sí, si no, no.
If she's in charge of my work, yes, I can feel that it's changed, but if not,
Es
no.
una respuesta muy esquemática, pero no tengo otra.
It's like a schematic answer, but that's the one I have. Because
En general, detesto el mundo comercial de la producción.
in general, I hate the commercial world of a production.
Es un mundo tan distinto a realizar que tú lo olvidas.
And it's different that it's so world to filmmaking that you tend to forget about it.
Por eso es que lo llevamos mal.
And that's why we are so bad at it.
Yeah.
Es así, es la vida.
That's how life goes.
There's just one other thing I noticed the last 5 years which happened. I think for documentary makers, you invest a lot in a project before you get the financing. You need a lot of time.
Yeah.
And 2 things happened in Holland which I think are very good. The VEVAM, our collecting management organization, made a small fund for directors. You don't need a producer to have it, but just to invest in new projects. And also the film fund has this oasis where you can just apply as a director for new ideas. And us collective doc makers is also for spending a bit of our producer's fee for new projects. And that is so important that you find ways to water the seeds of plants and this early period of research.
Yeah, it's a good point. Often people think, well, ideas are just there, right? And then you apply with your idea and then you get money, but as if the idea comes out of the blue from nothing. So how do you fund that? And these initiatives you mentioned are interesting. But for me also, the idea of remuneration is an important way to finance exactly this. Where do ideas come from? How to finance that while you're not actually in a production? That is where the money you get from your copyright and the sharing of revenue, that's your own business investment, basically, the whole thing. I wanted to open up into the audience if there were any questions which have arisen to any of our panelists. Yes, I see a hand up here.
Yeah, I have I guess a comment and a question.
Sure. Please introduce yourself.
My name's Sean. I work with documentary producers on marketing and sales and rights management out of Canada in Toronto. And I think it's very progressive of IDFA to host a conversation like this. It's been very informative for me, and LaScam seems really awesome. I work a lot with filmmakers on getting their films into the market through film festivals. And of course, it's very interesting to hear the initiatives around sharing, royalty sharing and remuneration from broadcasters, from the VOD platforms. But of course, filmmakers are taught quite early to give away their work for free by film festivals. There are some 5,000 plus film festivals in the world screening works by many of the filmmakers without remuneration most of the time, or the expectation of remuneration. Is LaScam looking into other revenue streams that are there, from selling tickets to documentary films at documentary film festivals, or corporate sponsorship, or public money, and seeing that filmmakers are fairly and proportionately remunerated for presenting their works in this way?
Yeah. Well, that's a tough question to ask right in the middle of IDFA here. But I think a lot of filmmakers recognize the issue you put. You were already shaking your head. That's not what LaScam gets into.
LaScam is actually not intervening for exploitation in movie theaters. So the answer is actually no. But on our everyday work, we of course advocate for fair remuneration for authors on any exploitation possibility, actually, so including in the movies theater, sorry. And I wanted maybe just quickly to react on what Renate said about that.
Sure.
And I completely agree with her. Well, you said two things, actually. You said that even in France, you're not getting the revenue, or there is like a discrepancy between what exists in theory and in practice. I totally agree with you what's going on YouTube, but YouTube, Martin was actually asking for on-demand services. YouTube is actually a platform, a video share platform, and there are a lot of piracy of YouTube, of course, going on, but this might change a lot with the directive, because with the directive, before the directive, it used to be the users responsible for the content counterfeited, actually. And the platforms were hiding behind a special regime.
It's not our fault. It's just somebody put it up there. We don't need to do anything.
Yeah. So the platforms were hiding behind a special legal regime provided in the directive of 2000 called e-commerce directive. And they were not held responsible for the content broadcast. The directive says that they are now responsible, and they have to get the normal equipment and to make their best efforts not to make this content available.
So basically, it'll be easier for you to take down the illegal copies, I guess. But I wanted to, just to get back to your question, you had something to say about that still? Yeah. Please introduce yourself as well.
Actually, I'm the president of LaScam, so I'm very interested by your question. This is evidence that we are thinking about that. But first of all, we have to work with the festival in France to have this kind of idea going ahead. And maybe we can share the idea if it works abroad. This is one thing we are really, we have this question in mind. And in general, I wanted to say that I was really pleased to listen to all the authors, and the message I would like to send to you is that the collective action is really the answer, because one author alone can't do anything with the producer, can do anything with the channel, can do anything with the platform. Everything is really connected with collective action. So we do believe in collective action, so I really motive all the authors there to have this kind of initiative, and to be really in a fair and constructive discussion with producer. As you said, we really do want to have career. We really do keep on doing movies. So we need to have a fairful and planned relation with our producer. And they do have to understand that we need this kind of transparency to work together and make films, good films.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think you rounded up very well what I'm hearing a lot. The value of the collaboration between director and producer. I mean, literally, you see here what that value can bring. So I really urge you to invest in that relationship, both from producer side and director side, because that is we shouldn't be alone in this, and we shouldn't be alone in this as directors. We, as you said, collectively we can actually get things moving. Things like the copyright directive is really the result of the work of the collective societies, and it's quite a shift that's been possible. And because there's still a lot to do, if you're not part of any collective organization in your own country where you're from, dive into that. If you don't know where to begin, ask some people here, and they might point you in the right direction. But becoming part of it is the first step. We are right through time. So one last thing to say?
Lo que me inquieta es en todo eso, por ejemplo, la cosa de Netflix, todo el mundo habla de eso. Está bien si se encuentra un arreglo.
I'm still a bit restless about one issue, and that is Netflix, because I don't see that we have reached a real arrangement with them.
Por ejemplo, yo envié el proyecto de la nueva película de Patricio a un representante de Netflix, porque me dijeron, tienes que preguntar. Yo estaba muy sospechosa.
And everyone told me to send to a Netflix representative the last project that Patricio did, and they said I had to send it, and I was really suspicious, but I said, well, everyone said send it, so I did.
Y la respuesta era, nosotros no podemos entrar en su proyecto, tomamos todo o nada.
And the project is, we won't be partners, either we take everything or we take nothing, of course.
Y eso significa abandonar el derecho de la sala, no tener distribución, me lo devuelven de 3 años, pero nadie más quiere la película, poner en una sala o en un festival, todo está pagado, pero yo ya no tengo ningún derecho. Y normalmente es un derecho, una promoción, una salida en sala, después de un tiempo está eventualmente el DVD, después llegan las televisiones y todo está en Francia organizado de esta manera que la distribución y la película tenga vida a través de los cinemas arte y ensayo. Con Netflix no tiene vida, ganan alguna gente que ni veo y se ve en internet. Y eso me parece que es simplemente una clase de asesinato de la distribución de las películas.
For me, that's basically a murder of a film, because what they do is they kill the life of a film. What they did is they said, I'll take the film, and you cannot go anywhere else with it. And then what I see now is that at least a market and a circuit that works for me, because I go to I will lose my distributor, I will lose my theatrical release, I will lose the DVD, that's also a market still in France, and then I will lose a circuit that I know and that it works, just for nothing. And that's, for me, that's murdering a film, and that's killing the life of film as I know it.
Well, these are very pressing issues, and I'm sure we will be discussing it for time to come. As I started out with the quote that it's this idea of they want the total rights and you lose everything. This is, I know, there are a lot of discussions going on between Europe and Netflix and our organizations, but it's a pressing point to delve into. I want to thank all my guests for sharing their thoughts. Please give them a warm thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, LaScam, for organizing this, and IDFA for hosting. And if you have any questions, please walk up to any of us, and we'll be happy to chat further. And have a great festival.